Welcome to Real Health with me, Karl Henry. Folks, social media allows for the transfer of ideas, but a lot of it is unchecked and unclear, especially in the nutrition and exercise space. My guest today has made it her business to clarify fact from fiction. Expert in female physiology, exercise and nutrition, Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple joins me on the show. Lauren, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
I love your mission. I followed your Instagram for a little while now. You are taking on the influencers who are spreading misinformation and calling them out. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. It's fantastic to watch, and we need more people doing exactly what you're doing. Give us a sense of just how much misinformation there is out there.
I think there's always been some in fitness, but from my perspective, it's worse than ever before. And it's especially targeted towards women with fear-based messaging around, menstrual cycle or hormones during the menopause transition, and it really encourages women to focus on the wrong things instead of the basics that we know work when it comes to gaining muscle or losing body fat.
Yeah, it's always they're trying to sell something that is very simple, but they try and make it really complicated, or they're selling their own systems, or they're selling a book, or they're selling something that makes the whole area of health and fitness seem confusing, seem hard, and really and difficult to do.
I completely agree. The basics that work are actually fairly simple and easy to articulate in a way that is understandable. And so when you hear all of this overly complex messaging, it really confuses people into, am I, doing something wrong, or should I only do it this way? And really the thing that matters is consistency and finding something that is sustainable for you. So all of this fear-based messaging and rigid thinking is only going to deter people from doing the health promoting behaviors.
And let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us, how did you get into this space? How did you get in? How did you get into exercise and nutrition as a passion? Obviously, I know you studied it. You have a doctorate. How did you end up here?
So after my undergraduate degree, I worked as a fitness professional in New York City. So I taught group fitness and I was a personal trainer. And I was really interested in exercise science literature and muscle physiology in general, mostly because at the time I wanted to get the best results, for me and for my clients. And ultimately, I was so interested in the research that I decided to go back to school and get a master's degree and subsequently a PhD, really with a focus on studying women.
Okay, and in school and in college, did you play sports through college? Was this an area of interest then?
I was always physically active. I did dance and gymnastics growing up. And then I was a runner, not a great one. And I got a stress fracture. And that's when I got into resistance training because it's the stress fracture recovery is so long that you basically lose your ability to run and not, uh, perform effectively. So that's when I started lifting weights and I loved it. And I loved the feeling of, getting strong and gaining muscle. And it felt really empowering.
And when you were working with clients in New York, was this something that you began to see with them, which was they'd be looking at content online, they'd be looking at information, they'd be coming into you and say, "Oh, I saw this or I read this," and you'd have to to dispel that myth.
There was some, definitely the myth of, lifting weights will make you bulky, things like that. There was some around certain diets, but I think it's so much worse now because so many people go to social media for their primary source of fitness information. And that really wasn't the case at the time when I was working as a trainer.
And of course now, like to be able to give information, there's no qualification required anymore. That seems to have, and I have a science degree, so I share the same bugbear that people can kind of give information, and maybe with the best will in the world, but actually the information there's no qualifications behind it.
I think it's also the case that people think that anyone can read, interpret, and apply science, when actually those who have PhDs spent a really long time learning how to do that properly. And so it's not just about throwing up a reference and calling it science-based. It's really about being able to critically assess a body of literature and then make recommendations based on the evidence.
Because that supportive evidence piece is something we see a huge amount, isn't it? These people say, "Oh, evidence has shown us whatever," and they've picked one little bit of evidence that supports their argument or their theory or whatever, and it'll be a very small study, or it'll be on mice or as opposed to human or whatever. They'll find a way to make it work for their argument.
Absolutely. No, I'm seeing this a lot with weighted vests right now
Oh
and the
yeah.
recommendations for weighted vests. And these studies, they were wearing the weighted vests for 8, 9, 10 hours per day. And then the, marketed recommendation is, oh, hey, buy my weighted vest and go for a 10, 20 minute walk. So it's just a really irritating misrepresentation of science.
And of course, like with the weighted vests in mind, their sales funnels. Like I've seen the reels, and the reels are really funny, and they're in the house. Same with the walking pad; it's the same kind of concept. And then it's like DM walk below or vest below, and I'll send you whatever. And they send their Amazon storefront link. It's a sales funnel. The whole concept is a sales funnel to get you in.
Absolutely. And we see this in so many influencer space, or it's not even influencers, it's doctors or scientists that have become influencers, but they're doing so under this veil of credibility. Unfortunately, when you start overemphasizing some piece of equipment or supplements or a particular diet, then it's really, really difficult to stay science based
Mhm.
because you can't evolve as the science evolves without changing your business strategy and your messaging and your brand.
And of course, this is presumably why you started the social media v science campaign.
It is because I realized that I wanted to put out good quality information that would be helpful to people. But unfortunately, it's really hard to get information out there that is positive and science based without when you're competing with information that is really polarizing and fear based or telling you, everything you thought you knew is wrong, that sort of messaging. And so the social media versus science idea came about as a way to kind of juxtapose some of these polarizing messages and then actually, hey, let's look at what the science really says. And I'm glad that it resonates with people because I feel like at the end my goal is to tell you what really matters and promote a positive message of this is what you should do, and it's not just about taking people down or attacking other people online.
And are there certain kind of, I suppose, approaches or things people should look out for when taking advice online, like that idea of the sales funnel or everything you knew is wrong, this is the whatever. Are there certain things that you see time and time again that are becoming almost blueprints for fake news or fake information?
I think if it sounds too good to be true, it is. If it's overly complicated, that's a red flag. If it always seems like you're being pitched as you have a problem and I can fix it by this thing, that's another red flag. And people who are in the space who are refusing to engage with other experts because science works and medicine works in a collaborative way. And so it's one thing to have a different interpretation and have a healthy discourse around that. But some of these people completely ignore, delete comments, block other scientists and doctors because they don't want their followers to see the truth. They don't want their followers to hear the evidence. And that's really, really, really unfortunate.
And then, of course, you keep going at them, don't you? I've when they don't, you on your stories and stuff, you post up and tag them and ask them why they're not asking questions.
Well, I think if you are going to go on these large platforms and make bold claims about calories in, calories out, or rep ranges, or fasting, or weighted vests, or whatever the claim is, if you don't have human subject data to really back that claim, meaning we studied this in these people and the outcome is fat loss, muscle growth, muscle loss, whatever bone density. If that doesn't exist, then stop making that claim because if you're going to make a claim like that, a true scientist should be able to provide a wealth of references in 2 seconds. It shouldn't have to be this debate of, oh, I'm still waiting for you to share some evidence to back up your claim.
And the weighted vest is one you've mentioned. I've seen, and the walking pad is my other one. I've seen that. What else have you seen that you thought that just doesn't add up, or I've done the research on it? No, that's not right.
The menstrual cycle phase based training or cycle syncing is huge. And I have done the work in this space, and it's incredibly difficult to actually do the science properly. And that's another issue. But basically, this message that you should be changing what you're doing or changing how you're eating for certain phases of your cycle, it's another example of really, really overcomplicating training and nutrition for women. And I feel like it also ends up with women spinning their wheels because they're just constantly changing everything. And as I said earlier, consistency is so important. Progression over time is so important. And so if we're lifting weights for 1 week and then we're cycling for 1 week and then we're going for a walk 1 week, we don't have that element of consistency. And so we're not going to progress at the same rate.
And chat to me about that. I'm going to pick your brains on an expert level now in terms of, women and how they train. Should they train differently to men? Should they train the same as men? Do they build muscle in different ways to men? What's your take on that?
The major difference is the starting point. So, as an adult, if you've never lifted weights and you are a man, you will have more muscle than an untrained woman. And that is because as a man, you went through puberty and you had a surge in testosterone during puberty that was accompanied by an increase in muscle mass. So, your starting point is different. However, once you start to lift weights, then the rate of muscle growth relative to that starting point is the same regardless of sex. And when we look at the literature on, the actual practical training variables, things like load or rep range or rest periods or training frequency or training volume, the same rules apply regardless of your sex. So I really approach this as, if you're thinking coach client relationship, what's important here? It's the individual, their goals, their background, their preferences, their access to equipment, and we tailor the program to that individual for sure, but it doesn't look different just because you are a man or just because you are a woman.
Oh, I love it. That's great, great, good. This is really good. Chat to you around supplementation. Then I'm sure you've had a field day with that when you've seen. I've seen it myself. You've seen some of the reels, the content promoted around certain supplements. Cortisol is a big one at the moment. Obviously, in terms of we're seeing it in the Irish market hugely. We put a reel up ourselves the other day around that. The essential supplements for health, or what do people actually need, and then what are you seeing online that people absolutely don't need?
Well, I think it's very individualized, but I think most people are looking at supplements the wrong way because a supplement is usually used to address a deficiency. And so if you don't have a deficiency, you probably don't need the supplement. And in fact, it can go the other way because there are certain vitamins and minerals that we don't want too much of. And so excess isn't necessarily better. I think when it comes to supplements that will enhance our performance or enhance our cognitive function or things like that. Um, Unfortunately, these are really, really overhyped. Creatine is an example of a supplement that is effective for high intensity exercise performance, maybe muscle growth, little bit, strength performance, a little bit. But this is a little bit. This is probably not going to be something you would even notice. And if you're not doing the training, then taking the creatine is a waste of your time. And so all these recommendations around you must take these supplements and they will help with muscle mass or bone density or fat loss. It's really missing the forest for the trees because what helps with muscle growth is strength training. What helps with bone density is physical activity. What helps with fat loss is a calorie deficit.
And bone health and weightlifting, because we see lots of misinformation there around you have to lift heavy, you have to lift whatever. The reality is you don't have to lift heavy. You have to lift some weight to challenge the body to adapt, but the level of that weight doesn't have to be heavy.
That's right. It just needs to be sufficiently challenging. So that goes for muscle and also for bone. So if we're doing sets of 5 with a heavy weight, or sets of 12 with a moderate weight, or sets of 20 with a lighter weight, as long as we're pushing close to that, failure mark, then we know we're getting sufficient stimulus for muscle and for bone.
Fab. Menopause. I'm intrigued by by your take on what you're seeing online around that. There's menopause coaches, there's menopause ways of eating. It's a whole niche of a market created in particularly in the last couple of years in Ireland, anyway. And it's great to see people talking about menopause. It's really important, but also that comes with people targeting menopausal women with regards to misinformation.
I agree. The biggest thing out there is that everything changes with the menopause transition, and that you need a whole different blueprint for your diet or for your training, for the type of cardio that you're doing, that everyone needs to be on supplements, that everyone needs to be on hormone therapy. There's a lot of messaging around this. And it's unfortunate because, as you said, this population is really targeted by design, because there are things that are changing. It's a confusing time, and women are desperate to feel better and to change their body composition, or to address the symptoms that they're having that have downstream effects on their physical activity and their diet. So instead of sticking to what works and promoting just healthy eating and physical activity in general and consistent exercise and lifting weights, we see this overemphasis on these other things.
And what kind of things are you seeing that are being prescribed or being kind of promoted, I suppose?
One is that if you are post-menopause, you have to lift really heavy
Oh,
weights
yeah.
for muscle or for bone. There's also a message that, zone 2, or kind of moderate intensity aerobic exercise, is terrible for you and you must be doing sprint interval training. What else is there? That you have to be doing plyometric or jumping exercises for bone health, and that fixing your or that fat loss is going to work completely differently, because a calorie deficit doesn't work anymore, because you are peri or post menopause. So all of this information is troubling, because it's just sending people down the wrong path. You don't get to say, a calorie deficit doesn't work, and but my anti-inflammatory diet will, or a calorie deficit doesn't work, but these supplements will.
Of course. And what about it naturally brings us to fasting then, because we're seeing a lot of fasting content, not only around menopause, but generally, and the impacts of fasted training on people. Chat to me a little bit about that.
I see this both for younger and older women, in terms of the messaging out there that fasted training will increase body fat accumulation, will decrease your muscle mass, will somehow wreak havoc on your hormones. None of this is true. Fasted training is completely fine. If you're doing a lot of high intensity endurance exercise, it's possible that it might affect your performance. And so you might want to fuel that for performance benefits. But generally speaking, for most of us who are going to the gym, if you're somebody who likes to get up in the morning and you don't want to eat before you go to the gym, that's fine. If you're someone who prefers to eat, that's fine too. So I think it's a tool, and it's not a must, but it won't hurt or harm you either way.
Yeah, so kind of what we're saying across the board generally is that you stick to the basics that we know work, and stick to what you know works, as opposed to falling for the trap and the pitfalls that are being promoted to you and advertised to you with very little research. And I know, one of the things you want to chat about is the status of women in exercise research, because it's very biased, isn't it?
Well, I think it, we know more now than we used to. So, if you said 15 to 20 years ago, we really, really need more exercise science, research in women, that's true. But these days, I think we're actually underestimating how much data we do have in women. And importantly, a lot of the studies that we're replicating now that were originally performed in male participants, we're seeing really similar outcomes. And that's good. If there's no difference, then that should be good news because we can kind of keep it simple. And so, as I said, when it comes to gaining muscle, gaining strength, losing body fat, the same things are going to work regardless of your sex.
And chat to me around, I suppose, the other key messaging that you'd like to get across to our listeners in terms of exercise and women, in terms of strength training, in terms of debunking the myths. What would you like to tell them?
The great thing around strength training is it's extremely flexible. However you do it, as long as it's challenging, it will be effective. Even if you can only go once a week, it will be effective. And you can use machines or you can use free weights, you can use heavy loads, you can use lighter loads, you can use a combination of all of the above. And you can choose which exercises you prefer. There's no must do exercises. So I think when it comes to a strength training program that works, when it comes to a diet that works, there actually is a lot of flexibility here with some underlying key principles.
And tell us about some of the key principles from a diet perspective.
From a diet perspective, calories matter. If you're looking to lose fat, then your diet is key, and focusing too much on the exercise piece, unfortunately, we're not getting huge fat loss benefits from the exercise. Not that you shouldn't be exercising, because exercise has all of these other benefits, but if fat loss is the goal, we need to look at the diet. We need to look at the overall caloric intake. We need to look at protein intake. I recommend aiming for a minimum of 1.2 grams per kilogram of your body weight. And we want to have an overall nutritious diet. Fruits and vegetables are important. Um, and managing your stress and your sleep also is important. But when it comes to all these nuances around pre-workout nutrient timing or post-workout protein, or only doing this rep range, or needing to go on this particular diet, all of that is confusing you by design, because by saying, oh, you must have tried that diet and it didn't work for you, and so try this diet. If that second diet you try does work for you, it's because you were in a calorie deficit, and that first diet you tried, you weren't.
We have a saying here, which is that you can't out-train a bad diet. And that's because your food is so important, and you've got to focus on that in terms of from a fat loss perspective, but from a weight loss perspective, it's dietary. It's all dietary. And the exercise then comes in on top of it.
Absolutely.
In terms of key takeaways, then, so from all the stuff that we've talked about, the three key takeaways that you would like our listeners to take away from our conversation.
When it comes to exercise and nutrition and the behaviors around those that work, men and women are actually not that different. The same rules apply to both. Resistance training is super important for muscles, for bones, and for overall aging gracefully. For it improves physical function. It's so powerful. If you can do it any way that works for you, I highly, highly encourage you to lift weights. And be careful about the information that you consume online. Think critically and try not to follow just one person, because sometimes we can end up becoming such a fan of that one person that we start to avoid questioning what they put out. And we need critical thinking.
If people want to follow you online like I do and learn a lot, where can they follow you?
Instagram at Dr Lauren CS1.
Fantastic. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Canada today. We really appreciate it. And the very best of luck with your campaign, and keep it up. You're doing great work in the space, so keep doing it. It's absolutely brilliant to see. Folks, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Real Health with me, Karl Henry. As ever, you know where we are, at Karl Henry PT on Instagram, realhealthindependent.ie, and on the Irish Independent website. Have a wonderful week. And if you like what you heard, don't forget to rate and review. Slán go fóill.